Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and here this afternoon to announce the arrest of Deputy Tim Virden on a charge of attempted manslaughter. On December 30th, 2015, at about 3:20 a.m., Deputy Virden shot Dylan Tompkins-Holmes after arresting him on a misdemeanor charge of obstructing. The arrest occurred as a result of a traffic stop in Johns Pass Village at Village Boulevard and 129th Avenue East in Madeira Beach. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office Robbery Homicide Unit conducted an investigation of the shooting. Our investigation determined that Deputy Virden was not justified in shooting Tompkins-Holmes. Deputy Virden violated state law and committed the crime of attempted manslaughter when he shot Dylan. The Sheriff's Office Use of Deadly Force Review Board conducted its own independent review of the shooting and also determined that the shooting was not justified under law or agency policy. The case was referred to the Pinellas State Attorney's Office, and the State Attorney conducted his own independent investigation. The State Attorney also concluded that Deputy Virden's shooting of Tompkins-Holmes violated state law and that Deputy Virden committed the offense of attempted manslaughter. The matter was presented to a Pinellas Pasco Circuit judge yesterday who found probable cause to charge Deputy Virden with one count of attempted manslaughter. The judge issued a warrant for Deputy Virden's arrest, and Deputy Virden turned himself in this morning at the Pinellas County Jail. He was booked and released after posting bond. As a result, I have terminated Deputy Virden's employment with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. This is especially hard as I believe that Tim Virden is a good man and a deputy who dedicated his professional life to law enforcement, and by all accounts, up to this point, had an excellent performance record. However, sometimes even good people do things wrong. When we do something wrong, we have to accept responsibility, no matter how bad or difficult that may be. And sometimes there are very serious consequences for our errors, and we have to accept that. In this case, Deputy Virden acted contrary to law and policy and did not accept responsibility for his actions. Rather, he fabricated facts to justify the unjustifiable, and in doing so stooped to that which he is supposed to stand against as a law enforcement officer. And he made the situation worse than it ever would have been had he just owned up to his actions. Instead of explaining what actually happened, Deputy Virden made up facts that simply could not have occurred and are wholly inconsistent with the physical evidence and the eyewitness testimony of another deputy. Deputy Virden shot Tompkins-Holmes while he was unarmed and handcuffed behind his back. It is clearly established that Tompkins-Holmes was unarmed and not a threat because Deputy Virden searched him and handcuffed him, which is captured on video. An audio recording and the eyewitness testimony of another deputy, Deputy Tom Randall, established that Tompkins-Holmes offered no active resistance to Deputy Virden and that he never touched Deputy Virden's gun. Moreover, when Deputy Virden shot Tompkins-Holmes, as established by Deputy Virden's own statements, the only gun was the one completely in the hands of Deputy Virden, and Tompkins-Holmes was handcuffed behind his back at the time he was shot. At this point, I'm going to play for you a video. And this is video that is looking out from the dashboard camera of Deputy Virden's cruiser. And what you'll see in the video is Deputy Virden and Deputy Randall up by the car that Tompkins-Holmes was in after he had been arrested on an obstructing charge. They're handcuffing him, searching him, and then they walk him back to Deputy Virden's cruiser. Because the camera is facing, which would be west, out of the dashboard of Deputy Virden's cruiser, once they pass the front of the cruiser, you don't see anything else. But the entire incident, including the shooting, is captured on the audio. Deputy Virden had left his microphone pack for the system that we use in the cruiser, so the microphone was in the cruiser. There is no video of the actual shooting itself, but there is an audio tape, and so I'm going to play for you now the audio tape in the video, and then I'll continue with the comments. So, Kristen, will you play it?
pussy, bro. You the softest bitch pussy there is. I'm trying to. You just threw me on the ground with a bitch. You threw me, I'm trying to get inside the car. Can you stand up? I'm trying to, bro. You threw me in the car with a bitch. Stand up. I got my pants to the ground, bro. Stand up. Where's your butt in the seat? My shorts on the ground. You ain't doing me a pussy. You're a real man, bro. You're a real man, bro. You're a real man. You're a real man, bro. Let me tell you that. You're a real man, bro. You're a real man. Keep going. Keep going. Bro, oh, shit.
Okay, you can stop. As you're watching the video, Deputy Virden is the one who is on the right as you're watching the video. As you can hear in the audio portion of the recording, there is no struggle. There's no verbalization by Deputy Virden that Dylan was reaching for or had his gun. And Dylan was talking at a consistent tone up until the very moment he was shot. So there's no evidence of any struggle. There's no evidence of anybody reaching for a gun. And what you would expect to hear under those circumstances is verbalization, and that's the way law enforcement officers are trained. This is all inconsistent with Deputy Virden's version of the events. So I'm going to explain to you what Deputy Virden says happened. And I'm going to use these photographs here, and these are actual photographs from the scene. And this is Deputy Virden's cruiser. And what Deputy Virden says occurred is when they came around the front of the car, Tompkins-Holmes was handcuffed. And Tompkins-Holmes was standing right here, and he was trying to get him into the car. And as you can hear, and you heard on the audio, and there's no dispute about, Dylan Tompkins-Holmes was being mouthy. That's it. As he was trying to get him into the car, what he says, what Deputy Virden says, as he's standing here, is that you saw his pants fall down as they were walking him, and that he had bent over to try and pull up the pants. So as Deputy Virden was leaning over to pull up the pants, he put his arm up across the upper chest area of Dylan Tompkins-Holmes. And as he put his arm across the chest area, which would have mean he was pushing him back into the car, leaning him that way with pressure, he bent over. And when he bends over, what he hears are two clicks, which indicate to him both of the retention devices on the holster are being deactivated. And he claims that at that point, after both retention devices are deactivated, that Tompkins-Holmes is able to get the gun out of the holster, and that he is then able to take the gun back and push Tompkins-Holmes and then shoot him twice and do what's called a double tap. So, in order to accept this version, you also have to accept the fact that Dylan Tompkins-Holmes, where there's no evidence that he had any indication at all about how these retention holders work, and you have to accept the fact that he did it while handcuffed behind his back, while pressure against his chest, and did it with his non-dominant hand towards Deputy Virden's gun while his blood alcohol content was a .28. So he was drunk. This is the type of holster that Deputy Virden had. And as you can see on here, in order to get the gun out of the holster, you can't get it out. What you have to do is you have to push on a device that's in here to click it back. Then you have to push down, and you have to push it forward before you can get the gun out. And I can tell you that when Dylan Tompkins-Holmes is sitting here, and you can see in the photographs that he is sitting right here on the ledge, and he is wedged down in there. So he's sitting down like this. His hands are handcuffed behind his back. And so in his hands are in here between the seat and his body. So in order for this to have happened, he has to have taken his hands, come around like this, been able to, while handcuffed, do this, do this, do this, and then get the gun out. Didn't happen. No way. On top of all that, Deputy Tom Randall was right there the entire time and testified that Dylan was mouthy, but never offered any active resistance and never reached for or touched Deputy Virden's gun. So as you can see by these photos, you've got Dylan Tompkins-Holmes, who's in yellow here. You got Deputy Tom Randall, who's standing right here, a couple feet away. You've got Deputy Virden, who's right here. And the entire time Deputy Randall is watching this, the entire time Deputy Randall says that this man, Dylan Tompkins-Holmes, never touched Deputy Virden's gun, and he never offered any active physical resistance. He ran his mouth, but that's it. Deputy Randall, because they're having trouble getting him in the car, decided that he was going to walk around the cruiser to go open the passenger side door to help pull Dylan Tompkins-Holmes through. As Deputy Randall took enough steps, which are about 3 steps, because we did a reenactment of this, he took about 3 steps, which take about 2 seconds. He got right here to the back bumper of the car as when Deputy Randall heard the 2 shots. So Deputy Randall's eyes were off Deputy Virden and Dylan Tompkins-Holmes for about 2 seconds. There is no way that what I just described to you, where somebody is handcuffed behind their back, is sitting down like this, who's a .28 drunk, can reach around, do this, do this, do this, and get the gun out in that period of time. Can't happen. Assuming Deputy Virden's version, which did not happen, occurred, Deputy Virden claims that he was able to take the gun back out of Dylan Tompkins-Holmes' hands, and then he shot him. If this was the case, the only gun that was there was the gun in Deputy Virden's hands, and Dylan Tompkins-Holmes was no longer a threat to Deputy Virden. Again, assuming Deputy Virden's version, which is just impossible. It didn't happen, couldn't happen, there's no way. Is at that point, the threat was eliminated. And all he had to do was step back or walk away and put distance. There was no justification for shooting Dylan Tompkins-Holmes after Deputy Virden had the only gun that was present there in his hands, and Tompkins-Holmes was still handcuffed behind his back. When Deputy Virden was interviewed and asked about his justification for shooting Dylan Tompkins-Holmes, and confronted with these facts, that assuming what you say happened occurred, and he's handcuffed behind his back, and you've got the only gun in this gunfight, why did you shoot him? He said that Dylan was in an advantage of being able to kick me, injure me, wound me, whatever. That's a quote. At the end of the video, you hear the words, "oh shit." That's Deputy Virden. Shooting an unarmed person in handcuffs who, through eyewitness testimony of another deputy, has offered no resistance because the person might kick you is not the legal use of deadly force. Simply put, Deputy Virden's version of events could not and did not happen, and he had no legal justification to shoot Dylan Tompkins-Holmes. I support deputies' actions, and it is important for deputies to know that they are supported in the very difficult split-second decisions that they make every single day. These decisions must not be second-guessed or Monday morning quarterbacked, but they also will not be blindly accepted, and they must be objectively reviewed, which is what we did here. All discretionary decisions must be within the parameters of law and policy, and when the decisions are outside policy and outside the law, the deputy must be held accountable. There's nothing more important than doing what is right, and nobody is above the law. I have an obligation to our deputies, but I have a larger obligation to the citizens we serve, the office of sheriff and its integrity, the law enforcement profession as a whole, and of utmost importance, upholding the public's trust placed in us in performing our duties. We are the guardians of the truth and doing what is right, even when doing that is painful as it is here. Some might say it's a dark day in some respects, but it's a bright day in others, because it's always a bright day when the truth prevails and the system works. This matter has been thoroughly investigated and charges brought within 1 month of the shooting, as would occur had the shooter not been a deputy sheriff. We demonstrate here today that nothing is more important than the truth. Making a mistake is human, lying about it and making up facts that could not happen is not, and that is wrong and will not stand. The civil law applicable to this case is complex, but suffice it to say, when a deputy commits a criminal act, the agency is not liable for damages caused by the deputy's actions. Any successful civil rights suit would be against the deputy individual and not against the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. In short, we have no civil liability to pay monetary damages, as that would fall to Deputy Virden personally because of his criminal act. However, as I said, doing what is right is of paramount importance. Dylan Tompkins-Holmes has no health insurance, as I understand it, and the reality is that he can sue Deputy Virden and most likely would not collect the money necessary to cover his extensive medical expenses. I'm communicating with Dylan's lawyer and have offered to pay those expenses because I believe it's the right thing to do under the circumstances. This case will now proceed in the court system, and we here at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office will continue to do our best to protect all citizens and provide the best law enforcement services to those within our community.